Hi, everyone. I am McKenna from Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I am very excited to be back on here again today. We've got lots of events this week. I personally really enjoy our afternoon events with authors overseas, especially since most of the time those are authors that we might not have seen in the store. So it's kind of special that we are actually being able to do this, and also special to have some pairings that we're having. So today we're going to be hosting Will Dean for his brand new book out today, The Last Thing to Burn. And we have a special guest interviewer, Shari Lapena, whose most recent book is Not a Happy Family, her sixth thriller. So I'm going to bring them on in just a second. And those of you who watch us regularly know we give a little bit of a rundown at the beginning, and here we go with that. So I will say we're very excited. This Saturday is Independent Bookstore Day. Only happens once a year, and we're going to have lots of fun things and some exclusive. We have the Baby Yoda read onesies. We'll have the I Love Indie Bookstore's Blackwing pencils. We have a signed Nigella Lawson cookbook, amongst other things, including the limited edition Indie Bookstore Day tote bags. So we have the tote bags now, but all the rest of the gear will be available on Saturday, online or in store. And we hope to see lots and lots of local people. We still are, of course, requiring masks in store and limiting it to 6 people at a time. So just be patient. We want to make sure it's a safe shopping space, but we'd love to see lots of you. Also that day, we'll be on here doing a virtual event with all the Mystery Writers of America nominees for Best Novel for the Edgar. So that's at 1 o'clock, and we'll be joined by authors all over the world. So that's going to be pretty special, I think. You know, one of the rare upsides of this pandemic is being able to talk with people all over the world that we might not in person. So mark your calendars. All the rest of the events coming up this week are on our website, murderbooks.com. And now for today's authors. Will Dean grew up in the East Midlands. Oh, let me add him. Here we go. Hi, Will.
Hi.
Will Dean grew up in the East Midlands of the United Kingdom and lived in 9 villages before the age of 18. After studying law at the London School of Economics and working in London, he settled in rural Sweden, where he built a wooden house in a boggy clearing at the center of a vast elk forest. And it's from this base that he compulsively reads and writes. His debut novel, Dark Pines, was selected for Zoe Ball's book club on ITV, shortlisted for the National Book Awards in the UK, the Guardian's Not the Booker Prize, and named a Telegraph Book of the Year. Again, he is here today to talk about The Last Thing to Burn, which is incredible, and I can't wait for this conversation because I want to hear all about it. We also have, hi, Shari.
Hi.
Hi, Shari Lapena is the internationally best-selling author of the thrillers The Couple Next Door, A Stranger in the House, and Unwanted Guest, Someone We Know, and The End of Her, which have all been New York Times and Sunday Times bestsellers. Her books have been sold in 37 territories around the world. She lives in Toronto, and Not a Happy Family is her 6th thriller. All right, for those of you watching, put your questions in the live chat if you're on YouTube, or in the comments if you're on Facebook, and we will get to those in a little bit. Don't be shy. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and I'm sure there's something you're going to want to ask either or both of them. So I'm going to duck away and sit back and enjoy this. Y'all have fun.
Thank you. So, Will, here we are. I'm so excited. It's pub day for The Last Thing to Burn. I have it here.
Happy to be here with you.
And I have to tell all of you that this is probably one of the best books I've read in a really long time. So I was blown away by it. I have been recommending it all over. It is one of the most tense and gripping thrillers that I've read in a long time. And I can't wait to talk about it. Do you want to talk a little bit about the book, or do you want me to sort of talk about what it's about, or?
I'll let you do it, Shari. I think you can do it better than I can.
So the basic premise of the book is there's a woman who has been trafficked from Vietnam, and she is being held captive on a farm by a horrible man called Len out in the middle of nowhere. And she can't escape because he has taken the bolt cutters to her ankle and destroyed her ankle so she can barely walk, and she's in constant pain. And there are other ways that he controls her too. He controls her through these horse pills that she needs for the pain of her ankle, and he controls her through his threats to deport her sister, who's living in the country illegally. He has the power to deport her because she also came to the country illegally. And between the pain and the need for the painkillers and her sister, she's really trapped there. And he has all these ways that he controls her. He's got cameras on her all the time. She can't, if she makes a mistake cooking his meal, if she steps outside the rules, he punishes her. And one of the ways he punishes her is through burning her very few precious possessions, like her ID card and her photographs from home and so on. So you can see he's quite a monster, although he's a very banal, that banality of evil. He's a very sort of normal seeming kind of guy, but he's a monster, and he's got her under his entire control. And the tension in this book through small details, it's like, I've been telling people, this book is a masterclass in raising the stakes. So it's tense to start with, and then the tension just keeps ratcheting up all the way through. And when she has that child, oh my God, it's a really interesting cat and mouse struggle between the trafficked woman who Len calls Jane after his mother, which is creepy in itself. And Len, and they have this child. She has this child, and it's that child that gives her the motivation to somehow survive and keep going. And I've talked way too long, but
no, that was beautiful. You did an amazing job.
Interesting book, and I just want to read a small portion, if that's okay with you, just like 3 sentences. But what I want to point out about this book is it's just written so beautifully, and it's just sort of it goes beyond what a normal thriller does. So for instance, here she's in a lot of pain and she wants her horse pill, and Len says, we'll see about the rest of that pill, maybe after you've had dinner. She's done something wrong. She says, that is hope right there, the chance that I might black out, be swept away by the tide into a deep and dreamless sleep. He'll be watching me, monitoring me. He always is, gazing, staring, owning. But I will be at the bottom of the sea by then, a break from this Fenland life, a sabbatical from hell. The whole book's like that. I mean, the writing is beautiful. The plot is fantastic. There's a twist in there that I sure didn't see coming, and I'm usually pretty good at those. So, well, I don't know what to say. How did you do it?
Well, honestly, you saying that you didn't see the twist coming is a huge thing for me, because you're kind of the queen of twists.
Yeah, but I didn't see that one, and I was blown away. And I'm really sorry that we can't talk about it because we can't do any spoilers. But oh my gosh, that just kind of ripped my guts out when I read the twist. Which I'm sorry, we can't talk about it. You're gonna have to buy the book and read it. And when you do, you'll know what we're talking about, right, Will?
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's the same thing when, it must be the same for you when you talk about your books. Like, you can't talk about the plot so much because you have to talk around those issues rather than directly into the story and the ending. Yeah.
But the way you built your book, it's so the details are everything in this book. And so they just keep layering on top of each other. And yeah, I did not see that twist coming, and it was such a perfect sort of stomach punch, Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, well, lots of things. First of all, the title. Who came up with that title? Because it works in a few ways.
It does. It's a very clever title. That's because it's not my idea. I'm actually really bad at titles. Like, I think less than half of my books have my title. Normally the editor. Okay. Yeah, normally my editor's very kind of polite about it, but she'll tell me let's think of a better option. And she came up with The Last Thing to Burn, and instantly I was like, yeah, that's the title. That's perfect for this book. Partly because as you were talking about, when our main character does something that displeases Len, this monstrous man, he will ask her very calmly, with no violence, to choose one of her remaining possessions. And on page 1 of the book, she only has 4 left. One is her ID card, the last thing in her own language. One is the letters from her sister that are very dear to her. One is Of Mice and Men, which is a book that gives her a lot of comfort and hope. And one is a photo of her parents. And he will ask her to choose one of these, and then he will burn it on the Rayburn stove that night. And there's something just very quietly menacing and creepy about the fact that he does it very calmly without emotion and forces her to choose one of these very precious items, and then it's gone forever. So yeah, the last thing to burn, like with every item, with every possession that gets burnt, that ratchets up the tension a little more, because as a reader, and for me as well, writing it, you think like, how is she going to handle this when she only has one thing left and she can't do anything to annoy him? I mean, that's just a horrific kind of situation.
Well, what I was seeing, like, you know, because the tension is so thick in that book, you think when she finally burns her last of those 4 things, the only thing left to burn is the baby. So I was, you know, really, what else has she got left? So that having her have a baby is like a brilliant way of raising the stakes, because she suddenly has more of a reason to live. And you got that, obviously you're a dad, because you got all that newborn stuff down pat. Oh, that was really hard to read. I think, not hard to read in that I had to put it down, but it was just so intense, really intense. And so she gets this baby, and of course it's not getting the best care because she's stuck in this little hut, and how she has to beg, and how she has to weigh the risks of asking for some Vaseline for the diaper rash. Like, how far can she push this horrible man just to get something for her baby? And there's that tension on every page that just drives the book, and you just want her to escape, and you see how really impossible it's going to be for her to escape. So you're wondering all along, how is she going to escape? Is she going to escape? Is the baby going to be burned? Yeah, it's super, super tense. I mean, everyone should read it, because it's just, like I said, it's a masterclass in raising the stakes.
Honestly, I was really tense writing it, and I don't normally feel that in a book. Like when I'm writing, normally I have like I'm invested in the main character, but I have a little distance from it. I'm not scaring myself every time I sit down to write a scene. Whereas with this book, through that first draft process, especially after the halfway mark, I was really like, I had a knot in my stomach. I was uncomfortable. I was genuinely really worried about the main character, which sounds bizarre because, you know, we're writing a book here, but I was so worried, and I really wanted her to get away from this place and this man and this life. Because, you know, he is the worst character I've ever written, for sure, probably will ever write, and she is like probably the strongest person I could imagine. So it's like the extremes here. And a lot of people have likened the book to Misery by Stephen King and Room by Emma Donoghue, because it has that kind of being captive in an isolated place, and I think that's true to some extent, but it's almost worse here because she can always see out. The landscape is so incredibly flat that when she's not chained up or anything, so she can look out and she can see like villages and churches and traffic, but it's always out of reach.
It's because the control is psychological, the threat to the sister, and the pain meds that she needs, you know. So it makes it actually more creepy than being locked in a physical room where you just have to get out. And her attempts to escape that always fail. Like, she's very resilient. I remember she hides these little hard candies in the wall for when she really needs them. Like, I would have been going for those candies on day one. I don't know how, like, when she really needs them, she's a very strong person. And, you know, you could see it going either way. You know, is she going to just give up? And then when she has the baby, it's just like she's going through so much. It's so hard, but she keeps on going. And then, can we mention what happens about another person coming about a horse, or is that too much of a spoiler?
Yeah, I think we can mention that.
Okay, you mentioned that, because I don't know how far you want to go on that.
Okay, so this is a very simple book, I should say. There's only 2 main characters, the woman and the man holding the woman captive. But at some point, another person comes into the fray, another kind of local person, and is also held captive. And that again raises the stakes, because at the beginning, our main character is fighting for her own life, fighting for her own future, fighting for autonomy and privacy and identity, and all of that is kind of being eroded day after day by this terrible man. But as soon as you bring in the child and the other woman, then suddenly like the stakes are raised even further, because she's not just surviving for herself, she's trying to make sure other people survive as well, which is even harder when you're being drugged and filmed and controlled. And he controls every aspect of her, like you were saying, like even down to the food that they eat and the way that it is cooked, which is exactly how his late mother would cook all the food. So she really has very little wriggle room to look after these other people who she feels responsible for. And one of the worst things is that he treats this as kind of a real marriage, this kind of charade, this sham of an existence, and he almost kind of believes in it. He's very twisted, simple, and complicated character. So of an evening when they watch football, he'll have us sit on the floor by his knee, and he'll kind of say things like, "It's not a bad life, is it, Jane?
I know.
You know, roof over our heads, food in our bellies. It's not a bad life." And he believes that. And those were some of the hardest scenes for me to write, because it's just so creepy and awful.
And yet the whole book's very believable. Like, it's very rooted in reality. The details are very simple, but very gripping. I mean, how she can't even go to the bathroom without leaving the door open. Like, the door has to be open. She's watched all the time. And and then he goes off to feed the pigs, and she at least is alone, but she's got the cameras watching her all the time. So it's a horrific existence. So let me get to some questions, because I haven't done my questions. What inspired you to write about a trafficked person?
Great question. So I think the idea came to me in 2016, so 5 years ago, and I was laying in bed. My wife was asleep, and I suddenly had this image in my head, which is how I normally start any book. I had an image pop into my head of a completely flat landscape, these fens, this agricultural land in England where I'm from. And I saw from an aerial perspective this tiny little house, 2 rooms upstairs, 2 rooms downstairs. And I saw a woman walking around from above, and I could see her going in and out of the cottage and around it, but she never went very far away. And I knew very quickly that she was desperate to get away from this place. And I wanted to understand her story and what was holding her back. And then between midnight and 6 a.m., I had the entire idea for the book, every key scene, all the relationships. And I kind of understood the book by 6 a.m. And I kind of told my wife about it. And I saw her, and I knew that she was Vietnamese. And I don't know where that came from.
You've never been to Vietnam?
I have, and I have Vietnamese family. My sister-in-law, my niece, and my nephew are Vietnamese. They live in Vietnam, and I've been there to visit them. So, I mean, possibly that creeps into my subconscious. I don't know. I feel like, especially when I have an idea in the middle of the night, I don't have much control over where that idea comes from. I just see it in my mind's eye, and then I kind of want to go with it and see where it leads. And if it's a story, and 9 out of 10 times it'll just, as you know, they just kind of fizzle out, and they don't have the legs to become a book. But this one was so clear, and I really felt, in a way, her desire to get away from this place. And I understood in it straight away that there was a natural tension and conflict there in the story, and I wanted her to get away. And with him, he came to me very strongly as well, because I guess I recognized some characters like that from my youth. You know, I grew up in a very kind of blue-collar agricultural place, and a lot of the farmers, and I used to work construction for a little while, went like to pay my way through university, and a lot of those guys, the older guys, they were just very emotionally kind of flat. And I'm sure they weren't bad guys at all, but they had a very old-fashioned idea of masculinity and of family life. So I kind of tapped into some of that with his language and the way he talked about her, and the lack of value he placed on her privacy, on her ideas, on her language, on her food, things like that.
Yeah, I was wondering if you seem to know quite a bit about Vietnam. I mean, it seemed very authentic. And you seem to know a lot about trafficking. Did you do a lot of research on this? How do you Google? Do you read articles?
I did a lot of research. I can hear you. I spent 6 months researching, 6 solid months. So I had the idea, and then I went away, and I kind of wrestled with the idea, do I even have the right to tell this story? And I thought, if I'm going to tell this story, I need to do my research properly. I need to get early readers who have experienced some of the issues in the book. Some early readers who I talked it through at length with my sister-in-law, and I have another friend who's half Vietnamese who read an early draft. And I did research in terms of reading like NGO papers, first-hand accounts, and I spent much longer than normal on that research because I wanted to do the main character justice. And then normally, you know, it takes me a year to write a book, and this book took 5 years, partly because I was so careful and determined to do her justice and to write this in the right way.
Well, I think you definitely did her justice. And I know there's that issue of appropriation of voice and circumstance that we all have to tiptoe around. But I mean, you've done a beautiful job, and I can't imagine anyone having a problem with it, especially if you're raising awareness of this problem, right? I mean, I know in Canada we have all sorts of signs around, you know, there might be someone trafficked right next to you, and we're just not aware of it. So,
yeah,
you know, it's a great...
That idea that it can stay hidden for so long is utterly terrifying. Yeah.
One thing I didn't mention earlier, like this woman's been stuck in this house for like 7, 8, 9 years. It's not like 6 months. This is a very long time that she's been trapped in this house. So now I wanted to ask you about this book. It seems like it's a book you had to write. I mean, it certainly sounds like a book that you had to write. You're also known for your Tuva books, you know, about your woman in Sweden who investigates crimes. This is quite a departure for you, and you say it took longer. How was the process different? Well, obviously you did a lot more research on this one, but what's it like stepping outside of the Tuva thrillers to do something quite different? It sounds like you were writing Tuva at the same time that you were writing The Last Thing to Burn. So is that what you were doing, going back and forth between?
It was, yeah. It's a really different book, and I think it partly comes down to the fact that I read really widely, and you know, I think of myself first and foremost as a reader. And two of the things
I'm glad to hear
you
say that you read widely, because I do as well, and I think it's really important. Sorry, I interrupted, but it's really important to read not just thrillers. Like, you have to read poetry and history and, you know, nonfiction, and that really informs your writing. So sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
No, I completely agree. I think often the things that move me forwards as a writer are from completely different genres or books written 100 years ago. And if everyone's reading the same books, then it's difficult to find that little extra thing that gives you the confidence to break a rule or try something different. So, the Tuva books I really love writing, but they're very different. They're very kind of Twin Peaks. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of light and shade in those books, and it's a series, so you know that the main character is going to survive at the end of the book. So that tension is automatically not there. You know that Tuva is going to survive. And with the standalone books, I really enjoyed the liberating feel that I can go anywhere with this. And with all my standalones from now on, like the main character, we don't know if they're going to survive or not. So there is
That's the beauty of the standalone.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I love that idea, that Hitchcockian idea of surprise versus suspense. Like if you write a surprising scene, a bomb goes off on the page, that's exciting for a couple of pages. But if you have that idea of suspense, like the reader knows that there's a bomb ticking under the table, and it's very calm, and you have two people sitting at the table, they don't know there's a bomb there. Then you have that tension. And I just like that idea of, I don't really like gratuitous violence or writing that, but I do like tension. I do like that feeling of being disturbed and being uncomfortable with a scene. That's what I try to write.
Me too. And I think that's what a lot of us like to write. I mean, I try not to put too much, there's not a lot of physical violence in my books. I really like the tension, which is why I think I found this book so enthralling. Like, the tension was really palpable on every page, you know, and you couldn't tell where it was going to go. You just knew that the stakes got higher and higher all the time, and you cared so much about this woman, and you wanted her to get away. But honestly, I didn't have a clue she was going to get away. I thought, like I said, you know, I didn't know if the baby was going to die. I didn't know if she was going to die. I didn't know if Lynn was going to die. I'm not doing any spoilers. You know, but you read that book, you don't know what's going to happen. It's
thank you. I keep getting, the book's been out for a few months now in the UK, and Australia, South Africa, and I keep getting letters and emails from people saying, you know, love the book, but it ruined the next day at work for me because I sat down to read a few pages and I read through the night, and you ruined my next day at work. So I kind of have to reply apologizing. But on the inside, I'm so happy to hear that somebody had to continue reading until the end. That's a dream come true for any writer. And I've got to say, you
no better praise.
Yeah, exactly. And you talking about tension, the way you write tension and the way you write this simmering tension within a neighborhood, within a suburb, is exquisite. I love the way that you build tension between neighbors.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, that's what I do. But, by the time I'm finished, I'm, the tension's gone for me by the time I'm done. Thank God the readers still find it tense. But yeah, tension is a wonderful thing for a reader to feel. Like, I think readers love tension. That's why they read thrillers. They just love to have that, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what's going on. So yeah, I wanted to ask you, what was different when you wrote The Last Thing to Burn and when you write your two books? It's almost like putting on two different hats, right? It's a different style of writing. Is this The Last Thing to Burn? Is this your American debut? Am I getting that right?
It
is
is.
This the first book you've sold in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Wow! Congratulations. It's a tough market to crack.
It is, and honestly, it's a dream come true. It really is. I was a shy kid in the Midlands in the 70s and 80s, and from a tiny little town, and my dream was to visit America one day, visit Canada one day, visit North America one day. And it took me until I was in my mid-30s to actually do that. But I was obsessed with American fiction and TV and everything. It was just like, that was an idea of escape for me back then. So now, at my age now, in my 40s, to have this book published is it's quite an emotional day. And I'm glad I'm spending it with you, doing this event. I really am.
Well, I'm so glad I could talk to you on the day it comes out. I feel quite honored. So, in a non-pandemic time, I assume you would be flying into the US and flying into Canada. We could have had dinner. It could have been great. I imagine a year from now, you'll be doing all of that, I hope. Do you have another book, like another standalone coming up? Are you back to Tuva? What are you up to next?
I have another standalone coming out early next year. Also, very, very tense. Set in New York this time.
What's it called?
Yeah, I can't say because we haven't completely agreed on a title yet. We're still going through that. But it's about sibling relationships and revenge, and it's very intense, and it's a similar kind of thing, as in it's kind of one person's point of view, and it's very intense into that person's psychology, and then things escalate and escalate and escalate. So it was fun writing it.
That's interesting, because my new book coming out in the summer is about siblings, and the question is, which one of these psychotic siblings killed their parents, and they all suspect each other. So there's a lot of sibling tension there. Siblings are very interesting.
Do you have a great title for that book? I think that's a perfect title. Yeah.
Everyone likes that title. Again, I did not come up with that. The only title I ever came up with was The Couple Next Door. And it's funny, everyone misinterpreted that title. Everyone thinks it refers to the other couple, not the couple whose baby was kidnapped. But I just meant that they were like the couple next door, like just like any couple. But, I suck at titles. So as long as that
one worked really well.
That one worked. I want to talk to you about you as a writer. So what's your approach? What's your method? I know you start from an image, and I'm very envious. You lie in bed at night and a book comes fully formed by 6 a.m. and I wish that happened to me. It doesn't. What's your process as a writer? Do you plan? How do you approach writing a new book?
Well, I should say that's only happened once.
So good to hear.
Will probably never happen again. My approach is I'm very visual. So I start off with an image, and it's normally a person in a landscape in a particular setting. And then I just want to know more about what's going on. And I just think about that person and their life, and I come to know them over a matter of months. And I normally visualize the story and understand the key themes of the story, the key kind of plot points of the story. And I understand that main character. But I have to kind of daydream and visualize a lot for months before I feel any before I feel confident enough to try a first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I normally, after 6 months, I'm kind of itching to start that first draft, but I haven't really written notes or anything. I'm not very good at plotting or planning in that way. Yeah, and it's all in images, it's all in pictures. So it's not a very, I don't know, efficient way to write, because I have to go through that visualizing where I kind of every night before I go to sleep, I think about a particular scene or a particular part of the book, particular part of the story. But I feel like I've got enough confidence to do this crazy thing, which is to write a first draft. And then on the first week of writing the first draft, I sit down and it floods out of me. It's like an exorcism. So I wrote the first draft of The Last Thing to Burn in 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You must have been a nervous wreck by the end of that one.
I was very like emotionally exhausted and wrung out.
Yeah.
I really was. But I write that way, in that very intense way, because I can't sustain that for 6 months, which is the sensible way to write a first draft. I just can't do it because it's so emotional, and I stay in the main character's head the whole time for 3 weeks, pretty much. Like I'm always thinking about what that character's going through, and I write a scene in the morning, a chapter in the morning, and then I have lunch and I'm just thinking about the next scene, and then I write a chapter in the afternoon, and then in the evening, like I'm a barely functional husband and father. I pick up my kid from school, I wash dishes, but I'm very much not mentally present because I'm thinking about the next scene. And then, like I say, I go to sleep thinking about the next scene. So I'm always there. I can't really get away from it. I can't really have a very good conversation with my wife that month, and she understands that now. I can do the basics, but I'm not very present. And then after 3 weeks, the book is there. Like the first draft, which is a rough draft, is there. And then it takes me like another 6 months to rewrite. With The Last Thing to Burn, because I was fitting it in between the two books, it took 5 years.
And this new one that you're writing, that's out next year, the standalone, how long did that one take you?
4 weeks for the first draft. I did that last January before the pandemic hit, thank goodness, because I think if I tried to write that in like March or April, I would have probably just failed, because I found reading and writing really difficult back then. But yeah, I wrote it in January.
So did I.
Yeah, it was just like
hard.
Sucked all of our creative energy for a while. It was so difficult. And then because it's down, it's kind of written down, then I feel like I can work on that like anybody with a normal job, you know, kind of 9 to 5. I'm sitting at my desk, I'm reworking things and finessing things. So that will be out early next year.
Sounds like you're like, I can tell you've always been a very setting oriented person. Your books are very setting focused. It's one of the things I love about them. And it sounds like you're like a real sort of immersive method actor type of writer. I'm the opposite. I'm like, every day, my 1,000 words. Like I sound so pedestrian, but it's the only way I can manage, because with my kids, I just can't ever get that month alone or 2 months alone. And I don't have the stamina, I don't think, at this stage in my life to do that kind of, but it certainly works well for you. And I have a question I'm just curious about. I know you live in the middle of the Swedish forest. Is that your house where you live with your family, or is that just your writing shack? Do you actually live?
Yeah, I live here in off-grid in the forest. But the shack that you see is my writing shack. That's the one that I show on social media. And the actual home shack, I don't really show that because it's like our private home, so I don't.
But is it also in the forest, in the middle of the forest?
Yeah. We live full time, pretty much off grid in the woods. So no neighbors. We can kind of walk for a full day in any direction. We're still in the forest. And a little bit like in the book, we use wood. You know, we use firewood for heating and cooking, and we have our well that we take our water from. So it's a very kind of simple life.
Have you ever been to Canada?
No, but I would love to go.
So, like, I think you'd fit in, like, with the whole lumberjack thing. I think we invented lumberjacks.
Yeah.
You'd enjoy my husband. He's totally off-grid, solar panel guy. You know, totally. We're going totally off-grid very shortly.
Well, when we have that dinner, hopefully, we'll be able to talk about these things, these important things. Yeah.
You'll have to come to Canada for sure. I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of fans here. What else did I want to ask you?
I was just going to say, Shari, before, don't change your process at all. Like, please don't touch a single
No, it
thing
works
about
for
your
me.
process. Yeah.
It works for me. And I think everybody finds their own process as they go along. And I've used pretty much the same process all along. And I agree with you. I wish I could find a more efficient process because I just blather everything out as I go along without planning. And then I have to do so much reworking. But I don't know how to find out what's going to happen otherwise. Like I'm just not someone who can lie in bed and have the whole story, you know, happen for me. I have to get the characters to do things to make the story move along. And if I didn't have my characters doing that for me, I'd just still be sitting there. So
well,
that's
I'm
my
not strong.
method.
I'm not strong enough to do it your way because I feel like when I'm writing, I'm kind of holding up an imaginary world, universe,
Mhm.
and I can't do that for 5 months. I would lose confidence halfway through and think, what was I writing at
Yeah.
the beginning of this process? What
Yeah.
was the first chapter like? So I would fail if I did that.
Yeah. It's a hard job. It's a great job, but it is a hard job.
It's a
And I see you
wonderful,
do a lot of,
weird thing. Yeah.
yeah, you do a lot of things on Twitter that I see to help out younger writers. Um, how did you get your start? How did it happen for you?
So typical slush pile story, really.
Oh yeah.
I worked so many different jobs in the UK, lots of strange jobs, and
I think we all have.
yeah. And
Most writers have, right?
it's true, isn't it? Every
Yeah.
writer I meet has
Yeah.
had like 4
Because we're no good
careers,
at
and
anything else, right?
it's true. We're unemployable at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my mid-30s, I was like, I think I was just a reader for all of that time, and I grew up in a house with no books, and I was just the weird kid of the family who wanted to go to the library and read all the time, and my family just thought that was very strange. And then so I was just a reader, a passionate reader all my life, and then mid-30s, I was like, maybe I want to write something, try and write something. So I wrote a book in the forest here, and it kind of failed. It was like quite good, but not good enough, and I kept trying to improve it, and it got to the point where agents were interested. And then I pulled it from submission when I was querying because I was like, this might scrape through, but it's not going to be my debut. It's not good enough. So I pulled it back and I wrote Dark Pines then. And that was my debut in the UK. And just a typical slush pile baby who was found in an agent slush pile, or a bunch of agents wanted to represent me. And I flew over to London and met with them all. And that is what, like you were saying, that's what I do on my YouTube channel, is try and give tips on how to write a query letter, how to choose between agents, how to write a synopsis, because all of that is very difficult to know, and querying is so terrifying. And
It's so, I understand what you're saying, because when you're outside of the writing world trying to get in, it seems impossible. But once you're in, everybody knows everybody. It's so easy. So it is sort of incumbent on us to try to help other people break through, because you know how it is when you're you or me and you go to festivals and you know everybody, and if you want to help someone, you say, oh, just go to my agent. Of course, the agent turns them down. That's what happens with me all the time. But it seems like such a hard thing to break through to. And I was giddy when I did it, and I'm sure you were too, when you finally get that moment when you fly to London or New York or whatever, when you get your first deal, and it's life-changing. And I see all these writers starting out, and I remember how hard it was. And I wonder if it's harder now than it was 10 years ago or not. I can't tell, but it's certainly difficult. And, it's nice that you do what you do for so many starting writers. I don't know how you find the time.
Well, I don't do it often enough because I don't really have the time, but I do it, whenever I have a week where I'm like between a copy edit and something else, I'll just kind of make a few videos and then space them out. And I think I remember, like you do, that sting of rejection so vividly, even though it was quite a few years ago now. That's what I want to kind of give writers a little bit of confidence. Like everyone gets rejected all the way through. You just kind of have to just keep going and keep learning, keep reading, and keep improving your writing, and you'll get there. But it's just that kind of lifting the lid on publishing a little bit for people who aren't on the inside, because it's such a secret world.
It is. It does seem like a very closed and secret world until you're in it. And so that makes it hard. But the other thing is that I would say to everyone watching is that there is no such thing as an overnight success. I don't know how many times I've been called an overnight success. Have you been called? It took me 15 years to get to the point where I had an overnight success. There's no such thing.
Absolutely, it's true. And I think a lot of it a lot of our writing career starts even before we ever type a word. You know, it's all that reading.
Yeah,
and
the
all that
thinking,
kind
the
of
reading.
Yeah, the thinking and the observing and the way people talk and all of this, that all comes into your writing later on. So, I mean, personally, I love On Writing by Stephen King, and he
That's a
writes in
good
there.
one.
It
That's
is,
a good
right?
one.
It's so good.
Yeah.
He writes in there something about you have to make sacrifices sometimes, sacrifice TV, focus on reading. And I did that for 4 years. My wife was not that happy about it, but we had no TV for 4 years, and I kind of doubled or quadrupled my reading. And that had more impact on my writing than anything else.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think what we said before, it's important to read outside your genre to get that sort of stimulation, so that you're not writing the same as everybody else, kind of thing. I wanted to ask you something else. Oh, and I've just forgotten what it was. But anyway, I ask everyone I interview, I ask the same thing. What is your secret snack when you're writing?
Secret snack? That's a good question. I don't know. I write kind of sensory deprivation kind of thing. I write in a small spare
You write
bedroom
hungry?
on a night.
Really?
Well, not hungry, but I have the blinds pulled, earplugs in, very kind of stark and simple, and I'll have like some either chewing gum, but that's not a good idea because then I chew it very obsessively, like too much of it, especially if I'm writing something tense. I'll just keep chewing and chewing and chewing. So the other thing is some dark chocolate, like 90% cocoa chocolate, broken up into a little bowl, and then when it's gone, it's gone. That works.
Yeah, same here. I like the 72% dark chocolate. You know, that's a good one. 72 to 90, perfect. I also wanted to ask you, are you still there? You've frozen
Well,
on
I think
me.
I probably eat more of it. I probably eat more of it than you do. So yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to ask you about Of Mice and Men.
I'm still here.
You chose Of Mice and Men.
It's my forest broadband. I apologize.
That's okay. Can you hear me? So you chose Of Mice and Men as the book that Jane is supporting herself mentally in the book. What's the meaning of Mice and Men to you? Why did you choose that book? Hello?
Well, I talked a little bit earlier about when I was a shy, socially awkward kid in the Midlands. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So back when I was a kid, I was obsessed with any story that was kind of escapist. And I love the fact that in Of Mice and Men, which was a school book that I read through school, the main characters always had that hope of getting away from their current life and having this very simple little kind of having their rabbits and their alfalfa patch. And it was always a dream that was out of reach, but it was something that kept them going through the hard times. And I kind of saw parallels with our main character in this book in that she didn't want much from life, but she wanted to live on her own terms, you know, to be her own person, to have her family safe and not to be living with this monster. So I did see some parallels there. And also I wanted to just, in a book that's this dark and bleak, those little moments of lightness, whether it's reading an extract from a book or it's having one of those candies from the wall, or it's just a little moment of beauty with her child. I think those moments of lightness are very, very, very intense because it's so bleak. So I learned that, I think, from Cormac McCarthy's The Road. You know, that book is so incredibly bleak, but then those little moments where they eat tinned peaches or they have a Coca-Cola, they're very beautiful because there's so much darkness there.
Well, I think we're probably needing to go to questions if that's what we're supposed to do next. Do you have questions?
Sure. We do have questions, and I just had popped on a second ago because I know it got a little glitchy, but I think we're all synced up again. So, all right. So we have a question from Laura. I think it's a great question here. How much does the book change from the first draft to the later one? And in particular, is the beautiful prose in there from the start? Do you add a lot of word count? And I'd also be interested to hear, Shari, like how does your writing also change from first draft to final product?
Oh, well, I'll let Will go first because I'm interested in about the beautiful prose too. That's a great question.
I think this varies for me from book to book. With this book, honestly, the first draft isn't that different to the finished book. Like all the chapters are the same. The main structure is the same. The things that needed finessing for me were Len's dialect, his very particular English dialect, because I had it far too authentic at the beginning. It was too difficult to understand. So I thought this is going to throw the reader out of the story because the dialect was almost as strong as kind of that Scottish dialect in Trainspotting, which is a bit too bold. So I had to kind of find a balance where his dialect was authentic, but it was still readable. But like, I don't know. For me, I deliver a book when I think it's ready. And with this book, it took a long time for it to get to that point.
Well, for me, my books change, I think, quite a lot from first draft to final. And it's because I make it up as I go along. So I move all kinds of things around. I change I change characters sometimes. I will change orders of things. I change a lot of things. The story is essentially the same because that's how I find out who the characters are and what the story is. But I feel there's a lot of rewriting the way I do it. I would prefer less rewriting. It's my least favorite thing to do. But there you are, you have to do it.
Right. I should have mentioned earlier that, as usual, I have a link in the comments, both for this book as well as to pre-order Shari's book. And I always also like to invite our guest interviewer to talk just a little bit for a few minutes about what is coming up next for them. So Shari, would you take a second and talk about that? I know you did a little bit about the siblings, but just give us a recap about the story.
Right. I can't show you a cover image or anything. I don't have a proof yet, but the new book is called Not a Happy Family. And it's about this very wealthy elderly couple who is murdered very brutally in their home on Easter Sunday in the middle of the night after a very fraught dinner with their adult children. And the three children soon become the prime suspects because they're all inheriting millions of dollars. And the father, who is a very wealthy businessman, very successful, is thought to be a bit of a psychopath, the way that very successful businessmen sometimes are. And really, the reader is left, it's a very complicated plot with lots of little teasers and hints and things and back and forths. But you're really reading to find out which one of these kids may or may not have done this really violent murder. And, and it could be, there's other suspects beside the kids, but then the kids are all looking at each other thinking, is that the murderer? So it's kind of, I'm looking at parents being killed by their own children, and I'm looking at siblings suspecting each other. So it's kind of gripping, actually.
Yeah. And I have your face is obscuring it, but there's the cover right there. Yes, just blown up from our ad. So again, you're welcome to pre-order that, and hopefully we will be talking with you about that one. Did you say July?
This one's out on, I believe it's July 27th. Yeah, in the US.
Excellent. Well, we'll have to get work scheduling another event with you. Okay, so let's see. One of our very regular customers, Anne, has stolen my question. I always ask, what did you read in your formative years? Essentially this. So what writers did you read growing up? And Will, I know you talked about reading voraciously, but you didn't give any names in there. So who were some of your favorites?
Okay. Early on, I was obsessed with Roald Dahl and the darkness of his children's books. And I reread them. I reread some of his books like 30, 40 times until they were falling apart.
Wow.
And then I got into Sue Townsend, who's a British author who wrote this Adrian Mole series, which is fantastic. And then very quickly and too early, probably, I got into Stephen King. That typical story of being...
but it's not you.
I know, right? Devouring Stephen King. And through him, I got into Shirley Jackson as well, quite early on. And adore her books, her novels, and her short stories. And I often reread her work, actually. I just think it's fantastic. And then later on, everything from Michelle Faber to Sarah Waters to Yaa Gyasi. I'm I love reading. It's for me, that's still an escape, and it's still like me being an awkward kid again, and just kind of going off into like going through that wardrobe again into Narnia for the first time every time I open a great book.
That's terrific. How about you, Shari? What did you read in your formative years?
You know, I was a complete bookworm, you know, like Will, and I was really into horses and ponies. So I read every horse book out there, you know, the Black Stallion and, you know, all the, you know, the Black Beauty, all the horse books. And then I got into the Nancy Drew mysteries. I love Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. And then I went from Nancy Drew, I think I went right to Agatha Christie when I was like in grade school. And I read all the Agatha Christies. And then I kind of got into Daphne du Maurier and, you know, some of the other suspense, Phyllis Whitney. And then I got into lots of history like Victoria Holt and Jean Plady. And then I got into classics. So like all the Russian classics, all the English classics, all the French classics. I've just been a huge reader forever. So I read everything. Oh, is that a dog?
Yeah, sorry. She just jumped up. I apologize. I'm going to put her back down.
Love the hair.
She startled me. Sorry about that. She's been entertained with a little treat back here behind me, and I guess she finished and wanted some lap time. Okay, so let's see. Tracy was wondering, how do you pick your characters and their names? Are they based off people you know?
Oh.
Will, you're up first again.
Okay. They're not based on people I know consciously in any way. I literally see them. So I see them. I normally don't see them physically that much. I don't really know what they look like. And I'm not a writer who like writes a CV for all of their characters. I don't do that at all. I just kind of have an idea of what's important to them in life, what they want out of life, what they're afraid of. And then when I start writing that first draft, because I know my main character so well, those other characters, the book's always about the relationship between that main character and the other people. But even at the end of a draft 6, I still don't really often know what they look like. Like in The Last Thing to Burn, Len, I don't really know what he looks like, apart from he's a big looming figure. I don't know. He's quite faceless to me. And in terms of their names, I think that's really important. And often I don't really click with a character until I've got the name. And I just have to kind of experiment, kind of like Shari and I were talking about with titles. You kind of, when you get to that right one, it feels right and you know it and you go with it.
Yeah. How about you, Shari?
I sort of feel like it's not so much that I pick my characters, but my characters kind of pick me. So they kind of, I don't think, what do I want for a character? I always start with the situation. And then I immediately take the main character and another character and I put them together and I see what they do. So for me, it's always the characters are driving everything, what they say, what they do. That's how I find out who my characters are. I just give them a conflict and I see what they do. So I never bother to do, you know, a sheet with all their characteristics. And I never know what my people look like. And I always get dinged. Well, could you describe her a little? Because I could care less what they look like. Like a looming figure is all I need for Len, right? That's really, I can fill that in myself. It's who he really is that matters. So I look at what my characters say and do and how they act, and I keep pushing them to do something else so that I get to know them better. That's how I get to know who they are, and I really don't care what they look like. Oh, and as far as names go, so go ahead.
I'm in awe of the fact that you don't know who did it at the end of the book when you start the book, or even when you're like a third the way through. I'm so in awe of that. That's so brave. And I think that's why your books are so brilliant, you know. If you don't know it, then we're not going to guess it either.
I know. And on occasion, I have changed that ending because, you know, I don't know. But as far as names go, very hard for me. And I struggle with it every book. I really struggle with names. I use the random name generator and then I change it 5 more times until I get the right one. So.
Wow. Okay, this one, I know that you've already said 3 weeks, but we're just going to pop this up here anyway. Will, how long did you work on this story? How was it going back and forth between the storyline and real life? We know 5 years, but answer what you'd like in there.
I mean, I think, like, you know, unless you're working from a castle and you have got nobody around you, you have to kind of fit in to some extent around your normal life. So what I try and do is just carve time. I carve out time. So first draft, I carve out like 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoon. And that's sacred. That like my door is closed, the kids at school. I've got my earplugs in. I'm not going to be disturbed during that. I have to be like, that's sacred time. And then when I'm editing, I'm not quite so serious about it. Like if my wife wants to come in and talk to me, that's perfect. That's great, because I can just kind of go back into the story, because by then I know the story and I know my characters, so I have more confidence. It's all about confidence for me. First draft, I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. It's like a white knuckle ride. I don't know how it's going to work out, if it's going to work out. Whereas after that, when I'm editing, I have some confidence. It's not going to be a disaster. My career is not going to be ending right now. I can work on this thing. So then I just carve out time. Like I'm quite bad. I work like 7 days a week. And for me, it's more about carving out time then for my family, because I really like just hiding away, squirreling away on books.
Shari, do you have a similar experience?
I think it's been hard for me to carve out time. Just my kids were younger and I was always taking them. My husband used to work outside the home. So I was always ferrying people around. I always had a lot of broken up time. I never have really been able to just carve out a week even. So I've always had to, I started off writing during 2-hour naps. And so I've always had to sort of work in short spurts, and I guess it kind of suits me anyway. But I forget the question. See, this is what the pandemic has done to my brain.
You know what? It's done it to all of our brains. Hold on. I'm going to get there. I'll put it back up here. How long did you work on this story, and how is it going back and forth between the storyline and real life?
Yeah. So for me, I have no trouble separating from the book and my life. And I'm constantly interrupted. And I used to make a point of stealing the do not disturb signs on every hotel door in every language. I've got them from Turkey and like you name it. And I put them on the door, and I put the German one on, and my daughter says, I forget what it is in German, but anyway, no, don't come in. And she goes, I don't read German. And then she just barges right in. So I've never really had the boundaries that I have needed. But I always write a book in a year, and basically I do a first draft in 4 or 5 months, and then I revise it for another 4 or 5 to 6 months. It takes me about as long to fix it up as it does to write it. But I have to say, I enjoy writing the first draft way more than I enjoy fixing it up. That's just me. I love the discovery of trying to figure out what's going to happen. Like I write every day going, "Ooh, I wonder what's going to happen," because I don't know. So I'm always happy to be surprised by a twist or something. So then going back over it and being analytical, not as fun. It's interesting that we're both lawyers, Will.
Yeah, it is interesting.
You're a lawyer and I'm a lawyer.
There's quite a lot of writers who were lawyers.
Yes.
At one time. Yeah. I don't know why
but
that
I'm
is.
actually, I prefer the wild creative bit to the analytical bit. Even though, we both have probably pretty good analytical brains. The creative part's more fun for me.
For me too. It's like that's a buzz for me. The first draft, I'm almost kind of high off the possibility and off the fear of this thing. But like you, it was interesting what you're saying about writing in your child's naps. I did the same thing. My debut, Dark Pines, that was written in his naps. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. And I've kept the same structure, even though he's now 7 and he doesn't nap anymore. I still work in his nap times. Kind of works.
It's funny. Yeah. So May Cobb, who has a cool book coming out with Berkeley next month, is watching, and she was wondering, did you outline the last thing to burn at all, or are you a pantser? And I know you've talked a little bit about this, but you want to elaborate some more?
It's lovely to have May here. That's a nice surprise.
Yeah.
I'm not really a pantser or a plotter. I kind of fall somewhere in between. I think of myself as a visualizer, if that makes sense. So I don't know like what happens in each chapter at all before I start to write a first draft, but I do know the main arc of the story, and I do know quite a lot about my main character, but I don't write anything down because I don't want things set in stone. So when I write a first draft, I'm kind of a pantser who has daydreamed the whole book quite thoroughly. So it's kind of like I'm cheating. I'm a pantser, but I kind of know what happens in broad strokes.
Interesting. I'm definitely a pantser, all the way pantser. Sometimes I wish I wasn't, but I want to go back to something you said, Will, a second ago about, every time you sit down to start a new book, it's terrifying, right? It never gets easier. Like everyone thinks, oh, you've written so many books, but we're always afraid of that empty page when we start the next one.
So
absolutely, it's like leaping into the void, and I'm always afraid. Sorry.
No, go ahead. There was just a little delay. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just agreeing with Shari that it is utterly terrifying, and that's why I'm so superstitious about my process as well, because like if it's worked before, I don't want to change anything. I just want to do my best to get this book out of my head, in some way that it resembles the idea in my head when it comes out onto the screen. And that transfer is so imperfect. That's what I want. I want that transfer of information or data to be as perfect as possible. It never is that perfect, but
yeah. We have a question. Is Bernie there or the cat?
So I was asking. My cat's asleep upstairs and she won't come down, so it's all Bernie and Monty.
Your cat is beautiful. Bernie is out on a long walk. He's like a teenage boy at the moment, so he needs a lot of exercise. So my wife is taking him out on a long walk. I'd take him on a big long walk in the morning. So he's not like in good behavior right now. He's not in here, but he is wonderful.
My cat's here. Poppy, come here. She must have heard you. She always sleeps during the day. Let me see if I can get her. Hi, Poppy. No, come here. Oh, she's running away. Poppy. No, not going to come up. She must have heard her name.
Well, we have another question for Will, and this is probably going to be the last question. You said you use headphones. Do you have music playlists for each book?
Good question. No, I actually use earplugs when I'm writing a first draft. I can't have any music or any noise at all. But then later on, when I'm not actually writing the first draft, but it's in, say, the evening time, then I often get really obsessed and tied up with one song for some reason. And it's often Tiny Dancer by Elton John. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I don't know why it is, but for some... I know, right? Credibility ruined.
Oh dear.
And the reason is, like, I don't listen to that song out of choice normally, but for some reason, when I'm writing a first draft, that book keeps me at a certain emotional level. I think it's quite a sad song.
Level. That's hilarious.
It's quite a nostalgic, sad song, I think, or maybe that's something I take from it. And I always get quite sad from it, and that is kind of where I want to be between writing sessions, so that I stay quite close to my emotions. It probably makes no sense, but I do listen to music in that way.
You know, it's actually interesting. I've heard several authors say that they will have one song on repeat, like the song that fits the mood, or there's a fine balance between you can't have something too engaging and you can't have something not engaging enough and all of that. So it does make perfect sense. I won't crop out this end of the video. I'll let the world know that Tiny Dancer is your editing song. It's all good. We had a comment that as much as someone misses live events, they're definitely going to miss seeing people's pets. So since Maisie is the only one to show her face with her little bandaged, injured paw, at least she can partake in the pet love. So
I almost got Poppy up here, but not happening.
I know you've been trying. Okay, well, once again, congratulations to Will Dean, Last Thing to Burn. We're so glad that you are now published in the US. We're excited about this book. It's absolutely wonderful. Can't wait for the next one. Shari, as always, big fans. Can't wait for July. Hopefully we'll be talking with you then. And thanks to everyone for watching. There's a link in the comments if you'd like to order. And I will mention also May Cobb, who was on here, will be doing her event for the Hunting Wives, I believe May 19th. So if you want to check out that book, it's a fantastic dark thriller, and actually a lot of fun. So look up Maycob if you're watching this. You'll want to tune in for that one too. All right, guys. Thank you. Will, have a great evening. Sherry, have a great rest of the day. And I'm going to disconnect us all. Bye.
Thank you both so much. Thank
Bye.
you.
Have some champagne, Will.
Thank you.